the dollar billionaire turned around to him and he said, "Don't ask me. I've never been through this. I don't know." You know? So when the dollar billionaires in the world don't know the answers and what's going to happen, then unfortunately, it tells you something.
Hi guys, my name is Matthew Rose and I am the host of the Likeminds podcast and CEO of Likeminds Tribe. Today we have a show series called Likeminds IG Live Series, and we speak to various entrepreneurs in different sectors on how they're managing their businesses and brands through this epidemic. Today we speak to the CEO of the Business Exchange, David Seinker, on the topic of leadership in a crisis. We speak around what does leadership mean to you or look like to you in a time like this. Enjoy.
How to get a jacket. It's a bit cold today. Having another live today. We speak to the CEO of TBE, the Business Exchange, David Seinker. I trust today is going to be a really awesome conversation. Can't wait to have it. A lot of questions around leadership and what it looks like. So I think that will be an interesting side to tackle in all of this. We've constantly spoken about like tools and stuff to get you through this age, but like what does leadership mean? So I'm going to tune David in and we're going to have a conversation around that. Some of you may know his buildings, and yeah, let's have that conversation. All right. Hey David.
How are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly too.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this again, hey?
Sure. Are you well?
I am. I'm doing quite well, actually. And yourself? How are you taking the whole COVID situation?
Yeah, I'm sure exactly the same as everyone else in the whole world, eh? One day at a time.
One day at a time.
One day at a
And I
time.
mean, yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, our topic of today is really leadership in a crisis, but I'd really like us to expand in terms of like, what does leadership look like, right? For your business and for internally and just externally as well. And I think that will be the center of our conversation. But I mean, just to start off, some people in our audience might or might not know you through our lives. So I'd just like you to introduce yourself, just a brief introduction, and then we can dive into the conversation.
Sure. So, yeah, my name's David Seinker. I'm the CEO of a company called the Business Exchange. And we have 5 workspaces in Johannesburg and 1 in Mauritius. We've also been operating for nearly 6 years. And our tenancy at our buildings include, big corporate companies, but also a lot of entrepreneurs. There's a big trend happening, or it has been happening for the past. Many businesses have been gravitating towards the shared workspace sort of industry, and they've been moving away from traditional leases, which is quite interesting for now, because the whole COVID-19 pandemic certainly I think is going to push both entrepreneur and big business more into our sort of our sector. But so we have different types of office packages for companies of 1 to 200 even, but we also have a focus on entrepreneurship, and we have a lot of events, like you guys have had also at the buildings. So we're very passionate about entrepreneurship and trying to connect people and help them network. And that's why we try and create ecosystems in our buildings where we've got both corporate and small businesses. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, we've had our events at TBE as well, Business Exchange. And that's what you guys have about. And it's just a really cool ecosystem, because you guys have like an ecosystem that works for entrepreneurs. It's not just a space. And I think that is pretty cool that you guys aren't just a space, but you also provide the tools needed for the different entrepreneurs to kind of, push through the, different areas that they may face. So that's pretty cool. What inspired having to get into this sector, by the way?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so I come from a corporate property background. I started out as at the bottom of the food chain, so to speak, at a corporate company. They were involved in property in the city, property conversions, and eventually I left there, went my own way. I developed, well, not myself, but together with some IT savvy people, we developed a website which enabled entrepreneurs to actually raise funding for their businesses. And we had a group of investors that would log in and look for different types of deals. So, and whilst I was involved in that business, I actually had an office at a now competitor of ours. And I saw there was an opportunity. This was about 6.5 years ago. And I saw there was an opportunity to do what we were doing and trying to connect entrepreneurs and investors and create a whole networking platform. I saw an opportunity to do that, but rather also bring in my property experience. And I saw there was a gap because there was a huge waiting list at the business center I was at. There was a lot of entrepreneurs and companies that needed flexible workspace. So my concept then came about, which was the business exchange, because I wanted to morph the two, have the property element where entrepreneurs and businesses could, rent office space, but also add something else. And that's where the whole networking and eventing side came in. And then, we launched our first project. That was 5.5 years ago. And we now have 6 with one in Mauritius. And hopefully going to grow more. Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. I mean, big up for that success. I think that's what success kind of looks like in 5 years, 5 to 6 years. That's pretty impressive. So yeah, like I told you, the reason why I wanted to have this chat actually was because I've been seeing what your online presence is like and what you guys have been doing. I think on a personal capacity and on a business level, I've seen your videos, I've seen the stuff that you've been posting. And for me, that's what leadership kind of looks like. It's being out there, having a voice and basically participating and doing what you can. But I want to know from your side of things, what inspired you to do that? And what does leadership look like for you?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, let me also start off by saying, I'm an entrepreneur like all of us, so I'm still learning the ropes. I certainly don't know everything. If I knew everything, I would have predicted COVID-19 was coming. But I think even the people who think they know everything, like Warren Buffett, didn't even see it coming. So let me start off by saying, I'm an entrepreneur like everyone else, and success for me is about continuously improving and reaching, always striving for more and trying to achieve greater goals. So I'm still learning like everyone else. But I think, I've always been passionate about business. I'm a driven person. I'm a driven individual, and I'm passionate about entrepreneurship. I'm a people's person, and I enjoy, dealing with people. And it might sound quite stereotypical or whatever you want to term it as. But I enjoy seeing people do well, and I get a certain kind of kick out of that, if one can say that.
Yeah, so, definitely. I feel that.
Yeah. So you're asking me, well, why do we do all this promotion of our tenants and events and online stuff that we're doing now? And really, for me, it's about helping. It's about helping others. And I think even in this day and age, we need it now more than ever. And it's part of our value proposition. It's what we say. There's 2 elements to it. On the one side, it's our why, that's why we do it. But for us, it also helps us position our brand and offer something different in the market. And for us to succeed, one has to offer something else. One has to offer, differentials and value adds. And that's our way of adding something different versus our competitors, and also giving back to entrepreneurs out there that are supporting us. By coming and renting workspace from TBE.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's quite cool from your end, at least, because I've seen how involved you are with your spaces and your brand. And I think, if anything, that is leadership, because even from some of your competitors, you don't kind of get that closeness from the other guys. Like, you know what I mean? You stepped out of your, your CEO blanket and been like, look, this is who I am. I'm ready to help, I'm ready to be here, I'm hands-on in my business. And I think for me personally, that's what I see the difference TV is versus some of the other guys. So that's pretty cool. What kind of advice would you give to an entrepreneur in your building, starting out and trying to do the exact same thing that you're doing? Maybe not in the same, but just as an entrepreneur, how to get out there and be very efficient.
Sure. So obviously the situation at the moment's relevant, and business now is tougher than business has ever been. People to quote people, they're saying that this is like a 1 in 100 year event, So I think anyone starting a business now would have to be aware of the current conditions. And I think there's a bigger point there too, in that, business is very much about timing, or as my friend says, it's about timing and execution. But I think, timing's a significant success factor, if we can call it that, in business. And so any business you're starting out now, you need to be needs to be relevant. And I think you need to be aware of the times. If you want to start an e-learning business now, fantastic idea. If you want to set up a bed and breakfast right now, perhaps not the best. So I guess you go, these things is obvious, but it's leading me to my next points. And my next point is around that is already important, timing and, let's say, execution. Because if you can't execute, then if you're not an operator, you're not going to get your hands dirty and get involved in your business, whether it be sales, marketing, finance, operations. I think even if the timing's right, you won't succeed. So someone could be setting up an e-learning platform now, which seems like a great idea. Schools are closed, although I see they're actually reopening next week. But if you can't execute and you're not a great operator, then you probably won't succeed, right? But to better answer your question, my pointer is that, and notwithstanding anything of what I've said, but there's business fundamentals, right? And there's business basics that you have to always be aware of and you have to be working on. So one example, and my point is that if it was relevant before in business, it's even more relevant now, and so I have a lot of staff meetings every week, and we haven't stopped them at all, since COVID-19 and our president's first speech. We've continued as is, and I've actually been at home for 7 weeks or 8 weeks now, because I was actually overseas. I was overseas, and when I got back, the day I got back, the following day, our president's announced, if you come back from overseas, you need to go into 2 weeks self-quarantine. So I've been stuck at home for a very long time.
Okay.
Yeah. And the day my 2 weeks self-quarantine ended, the first lockdown started. Literally like the next day, the lockdown started. So it's been quite intense. So I had to very quickly adjust to working from home and trying to operate our business of 30 staff also from home. So it's been interesting, to say the least. But my point is that there were business fundamentals before, and those fundamentals are even more relevant now. So, for example, you asked me what tips I would give entrepreneurs in our buildings that are wanting to start businesses. And the most important thing that always comes to mind, and I've failed in a business before because I wasn't aware of this enough, is cash flow management. So especially in this day and age, if you're going to start a business, you've got to be realistic. You've got to be realistic in your revenue projections. You've got to understand your costs. You've got to understand your VAT. You've got to understand all of your taxes you're going to pay, because if you don't account for that, if you don't budget for your taxes correctly, that can throw out your profit margins. So cash flow management is a key one for anyone starting out, and I think I certainly underestimated that before, because I had in a different business. I had a great idea, timing was good, but I didn't get the numbers right, and then you run into cash flow challenges at some point. And I think in this type of economy, not even economy, in this global setup that we're in, or difficult times of COVID-19, you have to be even more aware of that. I think so. That's one aspect from a finance side. I think choosing your partners is really, really important. And fortunately for me, I was connected with a company called Race Corp. They have a big business incubator company, and I didn't go to them necessarily for those types of services, but they have a division called Partner Elite, and that's more of a private equity type of or private equity arm of theirs. And they're investing in businesses, they're providing growth capital. But more than the growth capital, more important is that they're really astute, knowledgeable business people, and they've helped me strategically a lot. So I think choosing partners is critically important. Don't get into bed with people that, and they say, partnership's like a marriage. Don't get into bed with people that are not going to complement your culture and are going to, there's just not going to be a synergy there and a cultural fit. Because yes, they might give you money up front, and they might do this and they might do that, and they might open up some doors, but it might just be a bad relationship. And after 2-3 years, you hate it, and it's a nightmare. And I've seen this with people. I've seen it with friends, with other colleagues, or rather associates of mine, and they land up hating their businesses, and someone sells out for like a terrible number. So I think knowing your numbers, understanding your cash flow requirements in the first year, or even 2 or 3 years, and choosing the right partners is, I would say, these are some critical success factors as starting out a business.
Yeah, definitely. Those are some good tips, actually. Some of them I might look at as well. But how important is it to get outside counsel in your business? Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't get a lot of professional outside counsel in terms of like finance, in terms of like cash flow, and those things legally, even, because some businesses do very well in cash flow and just financially, but they don't do very well legally. And how important is it to have outside business mentorship as well in your business?
So absolutely. So just on your last comment there on mentorship, I think mentorship's hugely valuable. And so I've gotten mentorship from my partners. One can call it mentorship, one can call it guidance, strategic, guidance or help or advice. But having people that you can bounce ideas off, and having people that have been there, done that, and can impart that knowledge on you is highly valuable. And you can't put a number on that, because it can often be the difference between success and failure. So I think starting out as an entrepreneur or business, having people around you, having a support structure of people is hugely important. And whether it's you might not always be able to get all of it, so you might have someone who's just has a good business mind and has got some years on you and has been there, done that, as I said. Or you might have, as you point out, maybe it's an attorney who's a commercial attorney who's very good at drawing up contracts and shareholders agreements and agreements with your clients, because that's also hugely valuable. So I never had any of that. I didn't have any of the legal side, but I knew that, starting our TBE, we need to ensure that we pay attorneys and reputable attorneys to obviously give us the assistance we need in drawing up our contracts. Because, and again, it's a lesson I've learned before, either not having a contract, whether it be with partners or clients or service providers, either not having a contract or having a bad contract. And by bad, I mean just missing one key element that could either cripple your deal, or you could lose your deal with your hugest client. Those type of things will end up, you losing your business. So I think if you don't have a partner or someone close that you can rely on for legal advice, you definitely need the right legal assistance. And even if you've got people with legal, who can give you legal advice, you still need to lean on, or rely on rather, attorneys to help you with contracts. From a financial point of view, it's very important. And when I started TBE, I had a financial manager who handles our finances, because at the end of the day, it's critically important to know how you're doing in your business. Just because you've got a you know, you get a big client, your big client pays you out whatever, millions of rands or, you know, 100 million, whatever the amount may be, you know, if you can't, you need to understand the margin in that. You need to structure it so that there is firstly enough margin in it. But importantly, you need to then manage, you know, the cash flow, and you need to every month be able to have management accounts reported, you know, or sent to you by your accountant or your financial manager, so you can actually understand how your business is operating. You know, so it's hugely important to have those financial controls and measures in place, and also important to ensure no one steals from you. You know, so make sure you got the relevant and right controls in place, you know, for your banking system and things like that. Yeah.
And very important. Let's keep the good information flowing. Just a quick one. I just want to say shout out to everybody that's on the live now and those who will watch it. I think if anybody has any questions for David or myself, please put that through. We will be handling that as we go. I mean, the topic is really gone from leadership to just also touching on a bit of entrepreneurship and how to handle that. So any questions? I mean, David runs a 6-building office-based company, which is really huge. So he'd be able to come in from a tactical side. And I know you speak very in depth about funding and how to get funding and securing funding, at least speaking to the right equity partners or the right people at least. So that's something that David specializes in. So if you have any questions on how to raise capital, I think you can also throw those questions in. And yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to say before touching on my next point. I wanted to ask, how important is failure for you, or how important has failure been to your journey in terms of you being a better leader of your businesses now and being able to operate at the level that you operate at?
Yeah, so it's a good question. And I think, you know, entrepreneurs, you know, it's a common sort of topic that's discussed. You know, is failure good? You know, a lot of people think it is good to fail. And I know people that have tried to raise money from venture capitalists, and they actually, you know, one of them came back to me and said, you know, I told the venture capitalist I'd failed, and I was so worried. But he actually turned around and said he's happy he failed because he now knows that he's learned from his mistakes. You know, and I think we learn by mistakes. I think that's absolutely certain, and certainly for me, it definitely stuck. You know, all the lessons I learned stuck with me, and I think I alluded to some of them earlier. You know, ensuring that you budget properly, ensuring that you have the right agreements in place, because some of these points ultimately led to the demise of that venture I was involved in. You know, so I learned from all of that, and I carried that forward into this business, and I was very, very aware of it at all times. But I think, you know, saying that, having the right partners on board will greatly assist in ensuring, you know, that you don't have to fail. And if you fail, I think for me, fail and learn quickly and move ahead. Don't harp on it, you know. So, you know, that's also something that's important. Everyone makes mistakes, but it's how we deal with those mistakes and move ahead that ultimately counts, right? So fail quickly, move ahead, and build upon that. You know, I think that's a key point for me.
Yeah, definitely. So I think even someone took away from it saying that it's only failure if you don't take the learning. Yeah, pretty much.
Absolutely.
So now that we have this, still on the topic of leadership, now that we have this whole COVID-19 thing, like, some businesses aren't coping because they haven't been able to bounce back, you know, and I think that's you know, it has taken a hit on a lot of business. I think I just saw today that the CEO of Tashash is asking for, I think he's requesting funding from the government and stuff. And I mean, it can happen to any business. So I mean, just on that, like, how do you see us going forth from this point on? I know none of us can really predict the future, but like, it's hitting even the biggest of biggest, you know. I think Edcon actually also had
Yeah.
an instance where their business took a really heavy hit, but
I
it's
think
like
I see that. I see they've gone into business rescue now. Yeah.
the business rescue, which is, you know, it's like rock bottom. So it's like, how do we bounce back from these, you
Yeah.
know, these
So I'll tell you,
hits?
I'll give
Yeah,
a slightly negative answer, then I'll give a positive answer if I can do that.
that works.
So my negative, you know, I think within the first week of this crisis taking shape in South Africa, let's say, I phoned my business partner and I said, you know, what's going on? What's your view on this? And he said that he phoned his mentor, who happens to be a dollar billionaire. He phoned his mentor, and he said that he asked his mentor the same question. He said, "What now? You know, what's going on? What's going to happen?"
Yeah.
And the dollar billionaire turned around to him and he said, "Don't ask me. I've never been through this. I don't know." You know, so when the dollar billionaires in the world don't know the answers and what's going to happen, then unfortunately, you know, it tells you something. You know, it says something, and it says that, you know, rather it tells us that no one actually knows, and we're living in very scary times because it's so unpredictable. You know, and no one really knows how, when, what. You know, and I read an article the other day by Warren Buffett. Just not an article. He was just briefly commenting on something, and same sentiment there. Doesn't know. And you know, in the 2008 financial crisis, they were the first ones. You know, Warren Buffett and his team were the first ones to start investing, and they were quite loud about it too. You know, and they were getting really involved, giving their opinions. But they've been quiet this time, you know, and he even alluded to it. You know, he said they're watching from the side because they don't know either. You know, yeah, some people will say to me, "Geez, this is a great opportunity. What a great time now to go and start." You know, as an example, to start buying property. Maybe the property market's going to tank, and now it's a great time to go and look to buy property. My response to that is yes and no. Yes, because property prices are going to fall and it's a good time to start looking maybe, but definitely not now. You know, no one knows the real impacts of this yet. And if you think things are bad now, in 6 months' time, it could be a hell of a lot worse. So don't go buy property now, because in 6 months it could be a lot cheaper. So that's some of the negativity and sort of the negative framework, if I can put it that way. On the positive side, look, you either see the glass half full or the glass half empty, right? And maybe it's in my nature, but I think a lot of entrepreneurs will resonate with this when I say see the glass half full, because you can only control what you can control. You can only do your best. You can only work as hard as you can work. You can only try and navigate through this as best as possible. You know, some people will kind of see through the fog and start seeing opportunities on the other side. And that's what I'm trying to do every day. And some won't, you know, some will be like, this is just the end of the world, you know. And, you know, I, for one, am very busy. So, you know, it's also interesting for me because I hear about a lot of people that are just not busy. And I get it. Some people are on different industries and dealing with different things. You know, our workspaces have been closed since the 26th of March. We are reopening on Monday because only because we house some essential service and professional service businesses that would be allowed to work. There won't be too many, but there will be some. So yes, it's a step in the right direction for us, and we're happy to open our doors, even though it's not going to be busy straight away. We understand that, but you know, we want to do that. We have to do that, and we want to do that. But again, you know, for me, I've been super busy. You know, I've been working. I worked on Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I didn't take any public holidays because I'm trying to prepare. You know, we're trying to prepare our buildings for the reopening. We have health and safety policies for COVID-19 to implement. We have to ensure that our workspaces are spotless when people come back. And of course, people need to feel safe when they're there. everyone has to wear masks and sanitize and all these new laws and regulations, which are absolutely good. It's imperative and it must happen. And I'm also of the opinion, if I can add, that people need to use common sense. I think if people use common sense, and I'm not trying to downplay it, but I think if you leave your home and you wear a mask, okay, and you go to the office or the shops or wherever you go, if you're wearing a mask and the people around you are wearing masks, and you're regularly using or maintaining good hygiene standards and washing your hands, etc., then you shouldn't get sick. Your chances of getting sick are really, really low. So if the person next to you has it, the COVID-19, and they're wearing a mask, and you're wearing a mask, even if you come in close contact with them, you shouldn't get sick, right? That's, to me, the logical, thought process. And there's so much more we can do to safeguard ourselves, which we're going to be doing at TBE. But the reason I'm saying this stuff is because I think it can encourage people to get back to some, level of normality once the restrictions ease and we're allowed to do so. But I think just back to the opportunity side. So for me, I'm looking through this and I'm trying to see my opportunities, because, TV is also being hit, like every business. You mentioned Tasha's and restaurants and gyms. And I've got a friend who's involved in 8 hotels, I've got friends that are invested heavily in gym brands and franchises. And I've got friends who lend to SMEs, so I know a lot of, and I've got people who own tons of, people. I know people who own tons of property. So I know a lot of people are directly impacted by this, but you have to just see through the fog, and you have to kind of look for opportunities, do your best every day, deal with the nonsense, deal with the difficulties and the challenges that you're going to deal with every day. And I deal with them every day. I'm sure everyone else, in this forum is also dealing with trouble every day. But my only advice is that try and see through the fog, as I'm saying, and try and look for the opportunities. And I'll use an example, for TBE. So what does this mean for TBE? This whole, COVID-19. It means a couple of things. And again, I don't know the answers, and I read a lot of articles, and I'm like following the global trends and patterns and et cetera. But obviously the negative for me is that a lot of our tenants who we've been housing for a long time, unfortunately, they're going to come under pressure. We've got tenants that are in events and marketing and recruitment. And of course, these companies are directly affected. And if they can't pay their rent, it affects us. How do we then pay our rent, right? So that's the big negative for us. The positive for us is that I believe that there's going to be a far greater need for flexibility moving ahead into the future of office working. I believe there's going to be a huge hybrid approach. And by hybrid approach, I mean that, and companies of all sizes, whether it's 5 people, 10 people, 100 people, are going to now suddenly realize, what? Firstly, we want to de-risk and we want to cut costs. We don't want to have these huge offices for 10-year leases. We want to eliminate that, and we want to go more flexible so that if these things happen, like now, we can upscale, downscale. They've got more movability there and adaptability options, right? So that's one thing. And I also believe that they'll realize that some of their workforce can work at home. So if they've got a 20, 30 person company, maybe they'll realize maybe 10, 15 people can work from home, 10, 15 people can work at the office. Let's go for something more flexible, something more adaptable, and actually save costs, right? Because I think every single business in the world at the moment is trying to cut costs, right? Because that's what recessions or depressions do, right? I think we're more of a depression. But so I'm giving a bit of insight into my opportunities and threats.
Yeah, definitely.
Because that's kind of how I'm navigating through all of this. And don't get me wrong, I have sleepless nights. I have times where I'm like panicking, times where I'm stressing, times when I'm happy, times when I'm sad, times when I'm like, this is the biggest opportunity for us, and in times like, shit, will TBE be around? So all these emotions, I go through all the time, but slowly but surely I'm finding some normality, and I'm finding my sort of rhythm, and it's kind of happened to me in the last sort of week, where I've kind of adapted, and I've I found a bit of rhythm, as I said, and that I see the opportunities. I think they're becoming more prevalent for me and rather clearer in my mind. And I'm starting to focus quite nicely on them. And I know there's going to be a huge knock in the interim, and that business everywhere. You mentioned Tasha's. I mean, these are proper businesses. I mean, Tasha's is a big brand. I mean, she got a big company to buy into. She's a great operator. She's built a good business. You know, it's a sad story. But at some point, I would imagine she also has to figure this all out and be like, okay, you know, what does this mean for us? How do we change? Saying that, I don't think everything's going to change. You know, like, again, my opinion is, you know, also I have some people phone me, like friends and whoever, family and business people, and they say, you know, aren't you worried that everyone's just going to want to work at home? And I turn around and I say two things. I say, firstly, do you think everyone's just going to start working at home? Like, what happens if there's no more office? You know, so firstly, so I think that's a bit of like a rational way of thinking. But secondly, and more importantly, is that people need human interaction. And I think whether you're working or you want to go to the gym or you want to eat out a meal or just go for a drink or coffee, people want human interaction, you know, and does that just go away from a crisis like this? I don't believe so. So back to the Tasha's example, I'm pretty sure people are going to want to go, and you said restaurants again, and go and enjoy themselves. I know my wife's already planning our first restaurant outing. You know, might only be in 3 months' time, but she's already planning it. You know, so like, I don't believe in all of that, and I think there will be some level of normality that comes back. Is it in 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, or a year? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. I think schools are going back next week or starting to go back, which is a huge step in the right direction, I think. Some more businesses will open. And I think slowly things will normalize. You know, on the negative side, we probably haven't seen the worst of this virus, and it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And let's just all pray to God that our people are safeguarded as best as possible. I think there's some great charity work happening out there, and we can all just do our best to support each other. You know, everyone's in this together, and I think together we're stronger. You know, as our rugby team proved last year. You know,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just listening to your story, I mean, for me, that's what true leadership sounds like. It's not acting like you know. It's really doing your work, research, and you know, kind of doing an introspection on yourself and your businesses and everything, and just seeing where you're at and doing what you can, because that's truly what it is. I think the key thing is to do what you can, right? And as long as you are doing, then you're somewhat of a good leader, or a good leader, so to say. So, I mean, in the conversation of leadership, I think you've displayed true leadership, because like you said, you're doing what you can. You know, you're looking at areas where you can, you know, yourself, or where you can, you know, infiltrate or do better at, and you're doing exactly that. So I think in any business, whether service or, because even for me personally, I'm in service, right? And a lot of my business comes from people who have physical businesses. I may be, you know, capable of doing business online, you know, globally, but if you are in the facility or you are in a physical business space and your business goes to go south, it means that I don't, you know, have business from you. You know what I mean? So it's the ability to say, okay, cool, what can we do? Can we better help you with your branding or your marketing or your strategy, so that you can still have business, you know, or be in operation? And I think that's leadership, as opposed to acting like you know what's going on. It's being side by side with your people, your audience, your market, and everyone. And I think that's what you've been able to display. Because I was going to ask you about the PE guidelines, because you guys plan on running again, and like, what type of guidelines are you guys going to have for your tenants that return? You know, because it's like, those are necessary precautions, and if you don't follow them, of course, you'll be shut down by the government, that sort of thing. Many businesses have actually been shut down. So, I mean, if you can speak a bit on that, that'll be cool.
Yeah, so we actually released our health and safety policy today, which deals with COVID-19 and the rules and regulations that we are enforcing at all of our buildings from Monday. And we're taking the next, from tomorrow until the weekend, we're taking that time to train up our staff and to prepare our buildings for our opening on Monday. But there's various, it's quite a detailed document, and there's various procedures and processes that are being put into place. But for example, and again, I'll start by saying that we're obviously guided by government and the legislation that they put out. And I know that they are gazetting their final rules and regulations tomorrow, so we can all check that out. So there might be some changes there, but I don't expect too many changes. But without going into detail in everything, some of the rules that we'll have at our South African TB locations, because Mauritius is still under lockdown for a bit. So for example, and it's already a government law, but no one will be allowed into TBE unless they're wearing a face mask. And they'll have to wear those face masks throughout the day that they're at work. All guests, all TB tenants, guests, and staff will be screened. We have fever thermometers, so everyone will be screened when they enter our workplaces. They'll also have to sign registers confirming that they don't have any flu-like symptoms and or any COVID-19 symptoms. So they have to sign off that, and they have to provide the information so that if there are any incidents, we are able to track who's entered our buildings. Then we've got very strict cleaning protocols and systems taking place. We've got hand sanitizer machines pretty much everywhere in our workspace, from the co-working areas to the entrances, meeting rooms, all of that. On the note of meeting rooms, we've reduced capacity, so our meeting room facilities will only operate at 50% capacity to allow for some level of social distancing, and the same for our co-working hot desk areas. So we don't have large co-working hot desk areas like some of our competitors. We've more focused on the private office businesses. But the co-working areas will be reduced, and that every other desk will be temporarily unavailable. And then our gyms will be closed, and coffee shops will operate, but under a limited sort of food supply. And as I said, staff have been well trained, and we're obviously working very closely with the property managers to ensure that they're doing what, fulfilling their parts. So for example, I heard today that a couple of them are installing fever track machines actually at their lobby and their reception. So that will automatically scan people when they come through. Whereas in our workspaces, we've got the handheld mobile fever scan machines. So there's a lot of policies and procedures being put into place. And, as I said earlier in our call, I just think people need to use common sense, because if you're practicing all of these processes, or all of these policies rather, and your chances of being infected are actually, in my opinion, are very slim. So we got to use common sense. Also, no large gatherings. If you have any flu-like symptoms, don't come to the office. And if you stick to all these rules, we should be good. So that's a snapshot of some of them, but there are quite a lot of others. What we're also doing, is that we're also providing, or rather selling, face masks and hand sanitizers at cost price. Obviously not making any markup on that, but we placed a significant order that's arriving at our buildings tomorrow of masks, sanitizers, and we'll be able to offer that at cost price to all of our tenants. So it also takes the hassle out of it for them. And if anyone arrives at our buildings and they don't have masks, we can obviously, we have stock to provide them with.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's actually really, really awesome on your part. That really speaks to the future of business. I was actually discussing this with one of my other colleagues another time. We spoke about the future of business from post-COVID is really just going to be safer. You're going to need to be safer. You're going to need to have or take a lot of precautions, fine, because you deal with buildings and you have to deal with a lot of tenants. You would have more precautions than other normal businesses that operate on smaller scales. But then literally all businesses, whether you're doing e-commerce or whatever the case is, there needs to be some level of precaution and some level of health and safety precautions taken to kind of delivering your service or your product. And I think that's going to be a big thing going forth. I mean, if you're delivering some kind of like, whether it be water or hair products or whatever the case is, I want to know that this was sanitized or it was, cared before, arriving. And I would personally also take my own precautions by sanitizing the box or whatever the case is. But it's knowing that this comes from a place, and
that's
I think
important,
China's,
so that's in our policy too. All goods being received at our reception will be sanitized and checked before, passing that on to our tenants. So that's a good point. And there's other systems that, building owners and property developers will have to consider, such as ventilation. High-rise buildings will have different requirements because of lift access and capacity. So there's going to be quite a shake-up around it. And I think what's exciting is that there'll be quite a few technology advancements too that happen. And we're also looking at quite a bit of that, in terms of tracking and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I think I'm pretty much we've really covered a lot, and I'm pretty satisfied with the conversation. So I mean, just in conclusion, if anyone has any questions, they can pretty much ask that. And in the meantime, David, I'll ask you if you have any last points that you'd love to share with the audience for those who will catch the live now or later. That'd be appreciated.
I think it's just really one thought. I think just keep fighting. That's what I tell some people. Keep fighting through it. It's going to be hard. I think it's going to get tougher. And it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. But we will get to the other side. And I know. South Africa is a resilient country. We've proven it so many times before. We're a very resilient nation. We can fight this virus emotionally far better than many other countries can, because we've been through a lot, and we tend to, I've personally seen it. Like, I feel like people are coming together. It might sound a bit wishy-washy or fuzzy, but I mean it. And I think, and you just need to go online and see the types of charity organizations that are getting involved, and money's being raised. I know someone that's delivering maize meal to townships every day, and he's raised over 5 million rand for that cause, and I think the more we come together and the more we realize that we can get through this, the better, and we will get through it. And I must also compliment our presidency and our government. I think they've done an excellent job from the start of this. I was in Australia just before, as I mentioned at the beginning of our call. I came back from Australia, and literally a day into this, I heard our president speak, and suddenly everything erupted, but he was, our president and government were onto this very quickly, compared to Australia, they were onto it very quickly. And Australia is quite a careful, proactive country, so I must just compliment them. I think they've got a good handle on it. I think they have a very good advisory team around them, and they're taking the right steps. And I think they'll continue to find the right balance between guiding the economy and looking after our people. And I think that's very important, and we'll get through it. Yeah.
Definitely. I can agree. We did act very swiftly and in a time-sensitive manner. Although I thought it could have been done a little bit earlier in terms of the lockdown, it would have been better. But because we literally watched this happen to the rest of the world, and then it came to us. So it's like we could have been preventatively acted, but I still think
we did pretty well compared.
I still think
like America, right?
Because there would have been no way that would have had 0 cases, because there's always people who slip through the cracks. And for the fact the incubation period of the virus is a bit longer than, other viruses that kind of where you show symptoms really quickly. So on that, I think we did pretty good. But yeah, there was one other what do you call question that said, well, two really. One is, how do you keep your team inspired and encouraged in this time?
Okay. Yeah, good question. And we haven't actually touched on that, but I must actually firstly compliment my team if I can use this platform to do so. We have I think every day for the past couple of weeks, we've had health and safety meetings. We've had to have meetings where we discuss, requests from our tenants, and my team's been very proactive, very on the ball, very understanding. And perhaps I'm, fortunate to have just a great team. But I think in terms of keeping them inspired and motivated and active, sure. Does one need any motivation in this day and age? I think, as you alluded to earlier, that how many people have lost their jobs? How many? And it's so sad to see it. And so from, we've seen it with, we're going to see more and more of it, like Edcon, as you say, and the airlines and hotels. It's really, really sad. So I think, number one, and I include myself when I say this, I'm an employee of TBE as the CEO. I'm an employee, and I'm just grateful to have a job and grateful that TBE is alive and well and kicking, and I think it's people, TBE's people realize that, and they're grateful for that, because I'm sure all of us know some people being badly affected, either being retrenched or getting huge salary cuts, etc. And so I think our people have been appreciative of that, and they've really stood up. But I try obviously to motivate them, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. We spoke about opportunities, and I think the more you speak about opportunities, the better, to keep people motivated. But it's about coming together, and I think if you've built up a team that has a good rapport with each other, that cares about each other, will naturally just fight for each other. And I think we're fighting for each other, and we're fighting for our businesses, so that we're all standing on the other side. So from my point of view, it hasn't been too hard to motivate people, but perhaps I've been a bit fortunate.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was one more. Besides that, I think it'll speak more to your business. It's a question saying, just a second, I saw that. Okay, but I think the gist of the question, because I kind of remember it, was like, will there be any flexibility on your rentals in terms of the people that work at your tenants, that work at your space?
Yeah, good question.
It's a good question.
So
property.
Yeah, so it's a question with a short question with a long answer, but I'll try and give as much insight as I can. So and I'm sure we've seen companies like, actually, I better not mention companies. let me stop right there. But let me say this. There's a huge supply chain of businesses and companies and business, right? And as soon as one company stops paying another company, that has a huge ripple effect. So that's the first point that we need to understand. If someone doesn't pay someone else, that company can't pay their suppliers, right? So one needs to understand, and I don't think, doesn't matter how big or small you are, even the big guys are affected, because then if you don't pay the bigger companies, then the bigger companies can't pay their staff and their suppliers. Now, the bigger companies employ more people, right? And I'm not saying TBE is a huge company. TBE is like a medium-sized company somewhere in the middle. But I'm talking about the big companies as an example. So you don't pay them, everyone starts paying it, and suddenly they can't pay. So their staff are then affected. You talk about landlords and tenants. If TBE doesn't pay its landlords, it can also create issues, right? Because then they can't pay staff. If TBE's tenants don't pay TBE, it causes issues for TBE, right? So that's just some of the framework. But what's important is that you can't have like a blanket policy. And that's my opinion, because every tenant's circumstances are different. Okay. You also alluded to it earlier, Matt. If a tenant's in recruitment or marketing, or not necessarily marketing, but let's say events. If a tenant's in an events business, or a tourism business, they've got a travel agent, of course they're going to be hugely impacted and they're going to be impacted overnight. So one has to consider that, okay? The other things one has to consider is, was this tenant in financial difficulty before or not? If they were in financial difficulty before and they were struggling to pay, is it in their interest and is it in the landlord's interest to continue to offer some type of rent relief? Because perhaps there's no point. And I know that sounds harsh. It sounds harsh.
Yeah.
But if the business is not going to be around in 3 or 4 or 6 months' time, then perhaps it's better for that business to realize that. But if the business can come back, and I say this with a lot of, I don't mean to sound harsh, but if that business has a way to come back, and absolutely, that tenant should be offered some level of relief, okay? And one has to support. And we've had requests, okay? And there isn't one company that or my team and my committee, because it's not just myself, we have a committee. There isn't one company we've just said no to, or, we've looked at every case by case. And so that's some other information. But I think what's important also is, what does relief mean? What is rental relief? So it's not a matter of just saying, you can just not pay and it's just for free for a month, 2 or 3. Because, how does that affect us? Or someone else, because the company not receiving that money also has bills to pay and it has staff to pay. So the problem is, as soon as everyone just says, we're not going to pay, you cripple the whole system. And then, you cripple the whole economic system, everyone will be without jobs. So it doesn't help to do that. And I think the final point is that, so there's no one size fits all, as I'm saying. And the final point is, you also have to look at the business. So if the business has been trading well and they should be able to afford to pay you, okay, I think it's an ethical thing. I think that business should say, ethically, I'm going to pay. Even if I can't do this or I can't do that, or I don't have access to the office, as an example, I should pay because I can afford to pay and I don't want to break the supply chain here. I want to support my country and its people, and I think that's, for me, an important point. Be that as it may, it is a legal requirement that you have to pay your rent. And I do need to add that in, because I think there's a bit of confusion around that. So, even under lockdown, you do legally need to pay your rent. But if you're struggling, and some business will struggle, and TBE is sympathetic towards that, then it's the best way is not to write a letter to your landlord saying, I can't pay, I'm not paying you, take it or leave it. That's not the right way to do business, Rather write a letter to your tenants to your landlord, or pick up the phone and say, look, this is my set of circumstances. I'm going to have a bit of a cash flow challenge for now. I'm not running away. I want to pay. How can you assist me? And 9 out of 10 times, all things being equal, as I referred to before, the landlord will come to the party, and we've done that with some of the cases we've had to deal with. So again, it's a case by case, and it's a matter of looking at the circumstances and doing your best, be it a small business, big business, small, doing your best to try and assist in any way possible and keep the economy working, because as soon as you stop that, there's bigger problems that come through.
Okay, which is a good point, and it really ties back into leadership. Then again, being sympathetic, looking at certain things. But I think a good point I got from it is being able to support why you need relief. And a lot of people just think, hey, because this is what I'm doing and I need relief. But like you said, sometimes the business isn't even doing well. And they were about to be, in 3 months irrelevant, rendered irrelevant as a business. The model was probably outdated. So it's like looking at those things again and you thinking about it personally, like, is my business going to survive? Have we been doing well at all? Looking at the risk as a landlord, like, okay, not really. I don't think this will work out for us.
And I think
And I
there's a
think just
real, sorry, no,
yeah.
sorry. No, carry on.
Okay, yeah. I think having that kind of sympathy based on that kind of information makes sense, because I mean they always say business and emotions one side, but at some degree they do kind of converge, and it's important in situations like this, like where the country is going into a rut, and we really need to be there for each other. So you have to have some kind of sympathy
Yes.
towards your tenants, because we're all going through this. It's not like a normal flow of things where it's like,
Yeah.
how things were before this.
Sure.
And yeah, so having support for your relief and being in like initiative based goes a long way. Sorry to
Absolutely.
cut you, Dave. So we've got about 10 seconds on, and the thing is gonna cut. So I really thank you for the conversation.
Sure. Thanks for
And this
having me. It's
really
been great.
shout out to everybody that was on here. Cheers.
And that's all we have for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Follow us on all our social medias to get alerts on this type of content at Likeminds Tribe. Visit our website to sign up to be part of our community. It's www.likemindstribe.co.za. And that's all from me, your host, Matthew Rolls, signing out.